Hello viewers, I'm your host Uzma Jafri with another episode of South Asia Focus. Let's begin the show with Afghanistan, where the political situation is not getting better with the passage of time. While on one side, the country is consistently being attacked by Talibani insurgents despite an ongoing peace process, on the other, the opposition has started questioning the credentials and stance of President Ashraf Ghani regarding restoration of peace in the country. Mohammad Hanif Atmar, former National Security Advisor and a leading contender in presidential elections slated in weeks, has accused President Ghani of hindering the peace talks between the insurgents and the United States.
The accelerating peace talks that has seemingly borne some fruits after its first 6-day round in Qatar have seemingly lost momentum, with repeated hurdles being created by President Ashraf Ghani, accuses the former National Security Advisor Mohammad Hanif Atmar. His statements came in the wake of the President Ghani opposing the peace process that has sidelined the Kabul establishment, owing to Taliban's insistence, citing that Ghani government was merely a stooge of the United States.
The President of Afghanistan is certainly making things more difficult at the moment by unreasonably opposing the intra-Afghan talks, and B, taking measures that are extremely unfavorable to the process. First, he's criticizing everybody who's participated. Second, he's sending letters to the UN to bar the Taliban from travel.
An ethnic Pashtun former intelligence officer in the communist government who lost a leg fighting the anti-Soviet Mujahideen in the 1980s, Atmar, who speaks fluent English, is well liked by Western officials. He was a central figure behind a 2014 bilateral security agreement with the United States and a 2016 reconciliation accord that allowed former warlord Gulbuddin Hekmatyar to return to Kabul and rejoin the political mainstream. If he won the election, he said, his priorities would be national unity, peace, justice and cooperation domestically and beyond.
Well, first of all, we all want President Ghani to step down on 21st of May because his mandate comes to an end. Second, if Taliban want the same thing, they should also demonstrate that they are committed to the peace process, that they will be also ready to agree on ceasefire. That would be a good beginning. For them to show that they are committed.
The Kabul establishment that has feeling increasingly isolated, especially after the United States and Russia went ahead with having talks with the insurgents without taking Kabul into consideration, these developments have compelled Kabul to take all the possible measures to protect their pride. As per the reports, both sides had reached a consensus in the first round, under which foreign troops will withdraw from Afghanistan in 18 months after a peace agreement is signed, and the Taliban will ensure Afghanistan will not be used by Al-Qaeda and extremist groups to launch attacks against the US and its allies.
The departure of the US troops will have to be on the basis of conditions that will be defined by a peace agreement. It will have to be part and parcel of a peace agreement, not something outside the peace agreement. And the departure of these troops will have to happen as a result of the implementation of the peace agreement.
Moreover, with USA and Russia looking into direct engagement with Taliban, bypassing Ghani's administration has further damaged the credibility of an internationally recognized Ghani government, thereby leaving the leadership fumed.
We did not discuss the idea of interim government in there, but we are certainly supportive over caretaker government when on 21st of May the mandate of this government comes to an end. But again, our position is that such a government will have to be consistent with the provisions of our constitution.
Meanwhile, a second round of peace talks focused at hammering out a plan over the proposed deal between the two sides. One major striking point of the United States since the beginning of the talks has been to negotiate any kind of deal with the Afghanistan President Ashraf Ghani. However, the Taliban has outrightly said no to such propositions.
Moving on. Bangladesh has now decided to put a stop at the entry of the Rohingya refugees to its country. Recently, it informed the United Nations that it was finding it hard to take additional refugees as Myanmar, which makes tall claims at the international platforms, has done nothing tangible on the ground to make the repatriation process easy for the Rohingyas. A report.
Some 18 months after hundreds of thousands of Rohingya fled an alleged military crackdown in Myanmar's Rakhine state and crossed the border to settle in the sprawling refugee camps of Bangladesh's Cox's Bazar, Dhaka has expressed its incapacity before the United Nations of accommodating any refugee inside its territory. More than 700,000 Rohingya have crossed Bangladeshi boundaries since August 2017. Shahidul Haq, the Foreign Secretary of the country, informed the United Nations Security Council recently.
Mr. President, I regret to inform this Council that Bangladesh would no longer be in a position to accommodate more people from Myanmar.
Both countries have for long been engaged in a formal exercise in order to carry out a smooth repatriation. However, one or the other bottleneck has pushed the date. Moreover, the people themselves are reluctant to return as they say the conditions back home are not safe. Haq accused Myanmar of hollow promises and various obstructionist approaches during negotiations on returns.
In diplomacy, exhaustive list does not exist. Yet, I must mention that we have tried everything bilaterally with Myanmar for the voluntary, safe, dignified and sustainable return of Rohingyas and are now continuing our bilateral engagement despite hollow promises and various obstructionist approaches by Myanmar. We have also engaged with regional partners. Yet, not a single Rohingya have volunteered to return to Rakhine due to absence of conducive environment in Myanmar.
However, Myanmar has a completely different version of the story in which it says that it is ready to accept returning refugees since January. United Nations, on the contrary, says conditions are not yet right for their return. The Rohingya say they want guarantees over their safety and to be recognized as citizens before returning.
We are ready to receive verified returnees in a voluntary, safe and dignified manners in accordance with the bilateral agreement and arrangement with Bangladesh. We have proposed recently to Bangladesh side to resume the joint working group meeting in April. We are confident that we can make the repatriation plans a success if we both act strictly in compliance with the agreements.
Western powers of the Council lamented the lack of action from Myanmar's government. Several Council members from Western countries stressed that the return of refugees needed to be safe, voluntary, dignified and secure, and pushed for the Myanmar government to allow the United Nations widespread and unconditional access to Rakhine. United States and United Kingdom have both expressed their disappointment at the slow progress into the issue. They also appealed the international community acknowledge the presence of largest refugee camp and appealed all to unite in order to face the mounting challenge.
I think we're very disappointed that more hasn't been possible, that there hasn't been more progress. on getting the refugees back. And that obviously includes creating the conditions where the refugees feel able to go back.
The international community cannot ignore the world's largest refugee camp. We can and must take steps to effect change on the ground and to resolve this humanitarian crisis.
The 15th Member Security Council has been split over how to deal with the crisis, with Western powers pitted against Russia and Myanmar ally China. China says that prevailing crisis was mainly an issue between Myanmar and Bangladesh, and those two countries should jointly see a solution. Russia also toed Chinese line. In December, Britain circulated a draft resolution to council members that diplomats said aims to put a timeline on Myanmar, allowing the return of refugees and addressing accountability, but China and Russia have boycotted talks on the draft.
It is a documented truth that Pakistan harbors terrorism in order to subvert peace and harmony across South Asia, especially India and Afghanistan. However, more cruel and distressing is the fact that it is using innocent civilians of illegally occupied Kashmir, who are anyway accorded a novercal treatment, as shields to execute its deadly designs. Against the consent of the owners, Pakistan uses their homes to infiltrate terrorists across the border. It has also, on purpose, set up its military installations near the residences of people who become victims of the cross-firing when Pakistan Army employs heavy weaponry, again to execute diabolic patterns. A report.
A large number of people were seen moving to Hatiabala, a small town in illegally occupied POK, some 40 kilometers away from Muzaffarabad, in order to accommodate themselves in a camp for internally displaced people after an oft violent adventure by Pak Army and terrorists near their scenic hamlets left them flummoxed and scared. Although the region, under the direct patronage of Pakistan Army and its civil establishment, has been exploited as breeding and training ground by most dreadful of terrorist organizations across the world for years, and the villagers who live here have come to terms with it, an unprecedented escalation in terror operations of late has sipped in a wave of fear in these beleaguered people. Despite spiraling distress, the local government, which essentially functions as pawn to Islamabad's wills and desires, has not done anything concrete and tangible to alleviate locals' pain. The number of families coming for shelter is rising constantly, with the swelling concern of these undersized camps getting overcrowded.
जो रजिस्टर्ड लोग आए हैं वो 60 फैमिलियां हैं और तकरीबन 400 के करीब हैं। अभी जो सुबह मैंने गिनती की थी वो 385 मेरे पास बन गए थे, लेकिन अभी जो 5-6 फैमिलियां हो रही हैं तो ये तकरीबन 400 से ऊपर बन जाएंगे।
Life in camps is not easy, and the harsh winter has worsened the situation for the people. Inadequate supply of woolens, improper food and medical provision has left people reeling under gradually shaping inhuman conditions. Officials preparing for an uncertain future are clueless of their preparations. There is a logistical hurdle. Authorities who have tactfully created the situation have been apathic at taking any action. A stoic Nazakat Hussain, who has been running for his life in the wake of the propped-up mayhem, says that earlier it wasn't that hard to cope up, but this time around the situation has just gone out of control.
कल और आज तकरीबन 10-12 फैमिलियां वहां से शिफ्ट हुई हैं। जो पांडु अभी 12 फैमिलियां शिफ्ट हो रही हैं, जो पांडु आरपी गेट क्रॉस कर रही हैं, सफेदा गैप से गुजर रही हैं। इससे पहले कोई नकल मकानी वहां से नहीं हुई, लोग वहीं पे रह रहे थे, बिल्कुल अपनी मदद आपके तहत खुद उधर गुजारा कर रहे हैं।
It is not just the family heads. Children who are ignorant of the gravity of the situation too are bearing the consequences of this situation created and spread by Pakistan administration. They are deprived of food and education. Zina's children are sick and scared. She said she had no option but to abandon her home in order to protect herself and her children.
उसकी बाल बच्चा आन का दर पदर भूखे ते नंगे मरन लगे, बच्चे बीमार हो गए, आन का था सटे कैंप और सख्त तकलीफा बेचा.
Spreading terrorism, extremism and religious intolerance in Jammu and Kashmir, POK and Gilgit-Baltistan continue to top the agenda of Pakistan's deep state of army and its intelligence agency, the ISI. In a bid to improve its image internationally, Pakistan has constantly been trying to portray itself as a torchbearer of peace. However, the reality is that the army generals who hold the sway over domestic as well as diplomatic affairs of the country are in true sense a bunch of authoritarians who use all tricks in the book to keep occupied regions under their control. They have also been indoctrinating the gullible youth of Kashmir and using them as cannon fodder to fight their battles.
Despite being condemned globally for its devious activities, Pakistan is constantly portraying itself as a preacher of peace. In a desperate attempt to redeem its image at the global platform, Pakistan has played another bluff of calling itself a believer of the negotiations. It says that it has been working extensively to make the project of Kartarpur work in near future. Not to forget that enough of the evidence is available in the public domain reeking Pakistan's nefarious designs along the religious project of Kartarpur. A report.
In a unilateral statement suggesting that tensions were easing between India and Pakistan after India carried out an airstrike in the wake of deadly Pulwama attack carried by Pakistan-backed terrorist group Jaish-e-Mohammed, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi informed press that a Pakistani delegation will visit New Delhi on March 14th and then host a reciprocal Indian visit to Islamabad to discuss a draft agreement on a Sikh pilgrimage corridor. The Kartarpur corridor, which will officially open next year, is about 120 km north of the Pakistani city of Lahore and will be used by Sikh pilgrims coming from India on a visa-free basis to visit holy sites in Pakistan.
दो तीन फैसले किए हैं, मैं आपसे शेयर करता हूँ। नंबर 1, हमने फैसला किया है कि जो हमारे हाई कमिश्नर हैं सुहेल महमूद साहब, जो यहाँ आए हुए थे कंसल्टेशंस के लिए, हम उनको वापस दिल्ली लौटा दें और इंशाअल्लाह वो 2 रोज़ में दिल्ली वापस जाने का इरादा रखते हैं और ये कम्युनिकेट कर दिया गया है उनके फॉरेन ऑफिस को। हमने फैसला किया है कि जो हमने करतारपुर के लिए राहदारी के लिए जो हमने मीटिंग्स और नशिस्तें तय की थी, पाकिस्तान का डेलीगेशन इंशाअल्लाह 14 मार्च को हस्ब वादा जो तारीख तय हुई थी पिछली नशिस्त में, इंशाअल्लाह वो दिल्ली जाने के लिए तैयार है ताकि हम जाके उस राहदारी को अमली शक्ल पहनाएं और वो जो पूरी दुनिया में सिखों की और दीगर कम्युनिटीज़ की, हिंदू कम्युनिटी भी शामिल है जो उसमें आना चाहती है, उनके लिए राह हमवार की जाए।
Bigotry of Pakistan has already been exposed, earlier with a plethora of evidence available in the public domain speaking loud and clear of its dubious and satanic intentions behind pilgrimage corridor. It has been planning to provide moral and material support to secessionist groups that have been seeking separate homeland from the sovereign territory of India. The international community raised eyebrows over Pakistan after India and Afghanistan accused it of repeated terror attacks carried out in their territories, including the one that killed more than 40 paramilitary personnel mid-February. Its designs were further exposed when India, through its assertive diplomacy, informed the global community of Pakistan's agenda. Pakistan recently faced international humiliation after its demand to boycott Indian presence at Organization of Islamic Cooperation in Abu Dhabi were given a cold shoulder. The country has been feeling increasingly isolated after the incident. The major veto powers too are creating a diplomatic pressure. Pakistan has been desperately trying to ease tensions with those countries as well.
प्राइवेट डिप्लोमेसी को बरूए-कार लाते हुए अमेरिका ने बड़ा मुस्बत किरदार अदा किया है और दीगर ममालिक ने, उसमें मैं जिक्र करना चाहूँगा चीन का, मैं जिक्र करना चाहूँगा रूस का, मैं जिक्र करना चाहूँगा सऊदी अरब का, बहुत से दोस्तों का, किस का नाम नहीं, तुर्की का, जॉर्डन का, यूएई का, सब का, कि जिन्होंने सफारतकारी के ज़रिए कोशिश की कि मामलात बेहतरी की तरफ जाएं और मामलात डी-एस्केलेट हों, तो उसके इम्कानात अब रोशन दिखाई दे रहे हैं।
Hostilities between the nuclear-armed India and Pakistan reached unprecedented high when India attacked what it said was a militant group that had carried out a suicide attack in Jammu and Kashmir on February 14th. India and Afghanistan, two neighbours of Pakistan, have been the perennial victims of terror emanating from Pakistani soil. While it has been providing moral and material support to the Taliban insurgents in Afghanistan to keep the country unstable, it has also been infiltrating terrorists across Indian territory in a bid to attack its sovereignty.
Moving on to India, that observes a number of festivals throughout the year with great zeal and enthusiasm. Recently, people across the country came together to celebrate the biggest Hindu festival of Mahashivratri, whose celebrations begin with the break of the dawn on Shivratri day and continues the whole night. Have a look.
Temple decked up with flowers and lights, devotees making a beeline to seek the blessings of Lord Shiva, and atmosphere full of colors and spiritualism. This is what defines the celebrations of Mahashivratri, a Hindu festival that marks the night when Lord Shiva married his consort, Goddess Parvati. Celebrated on the new moon day in the month of Magh, according to Hindu calendar, the festival is most auspicious occasion for Indians and is observed with equal enthusiasm by people irrespective of their caste and community.
दुर्दुष्टनाथ महाराज की बहुत कृपा है। मैं बचपन से हमेशा आता हूँ यहाँ पे शिवरात्रि पे और बहुत ही यहाँ पे आके जो मन्नत मांगी जाती है आज तक पूरी हुई है हमें।
After having a bath, preferably in the sacred waters of river Ganga, devotees throng the nearest Lord Shiva temples during the festival. There, they give a ritual bath to the Shiva Lingam and offer wood apple leaves, milk, yogurt, ghee, sugar and water, which is believed to be Lord Shiva's favorite. Priests perform ritual puja amidst chants of Om Namah Shivaya and ringing of temple bells. Night-long vigil or jagran is also observed at various temples during the festival. Numerous devotees took part in the jagran and spent the night singing hymns and songs to honor Lord Shiva. Several people kept fasting on the night of Shivratri and break it next morning after having the sacrament or prasad offered to the Lord. Community meals are also served at several temples to commemorate this holy occasion.
ये आयोजन विगत 33 वर्षों से कर रहे हैं और निरंतर चलते जा रहा है। इसमें लगभग 10,000 आदमियों का प्रसादी भंडारा किया जाता है। ठंडाई, मिठाई, बूंदी, सेव, हर प्रकार का यहाँ प्रसाद मिलता है।
An act of groom's wedding procession, also known as Shiv Barat, forms the highlight of this jamboree. Hundreds of people with several musical instruments in their hand, especially drums, and dressed up in different costumes, move in this procession.
आज विशेष महत्व इसलिए है कि बाबा विश्वनाथ जी की शादी आज हुई है और माता पार्वती के साथ बाबा विश्वनाथ जी की आज शादी होती है और रंगभरी एकादशी के दिन गौना लाते हैं। यही हमारे काशी की संस्कृति है। काशीवासी मिल करके, सभी देव अतिथि मिल करके इस बारात की शोभा बढ़ाते हैं और गौना लाते हैं। जितना उत्साह उनके घर के बच्चों की शादी में नहीं होता है, उतना उत्साह इस शादी में होता है।
Mahashivratri is the much-awaited festival in India. Devotees believe that sincere observance of Shivratri Puja on this particular occasion and all-night worship of Lord Shiva will absolve them of all their sins and liberate them from the cycle of birth and death.
Shivratri festival is particularly awaited by Hindu women, both married and unmarried women, who perform puja with great faith on this day to appease goddess Parvati, to have good husbands or long and prosperous married life. With that, we come to the end of this week's episode. See you next week. Goodbye and take care.